Hello everybody, my name is John Piszczek, and welcome to Ep.5 of the Breath of Fresh Sports podcast. It's really crazy to think that we are already halfway to double digits. Whether you're listening on Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, iTunes, or even YouTube, thank you all so much for watching. It means a lot to me. If I can just entertain one of you on a weekly basis, I really don't care about the following. If just one of you can stay entertained throughout these episodes, well then I'm doing my job. And I can't say enough thank you to literally everyone who watches this show. Even if you click and watch for 15 seconds, thank you for showing any form of support. Now, today's show is going to be an interesting one. Unlike the past 4 episodes, this episode is going to be centered completely around New York sports and what exactly is happening in New York as we speak. Let's just say it's not good if you are a New York fan, whether you're a Knicks fan, a Jets fan, a Giants fan, or even a Nets fan. You know just how hard it is to be a fan of New York sports. I mean, the best thing going on in New York sports right now is the Brooklyn Nets, whose 2 best players are injured and they're 4 games under 500. That's the best thing going on in New York right now. And if you're a Jets fan, you already know what's going on by now. The Jets' arguably best player, Jamal Adams, safety, he has not so subtly demanded a trade out of New York. He did this through Instagram, and it's no secret that Jamal Adams has wanted out. Rumors about this surfaced months back at the trade deadline. There were rumors that he could possibly be headed to Dallas, and this was months ago at the NFL trade deadline. Apparently, he was offended by the fact that Jets general manager Joe Douglas had even accepted a call about his asking price. And ever since then, this has just been a burning bridge. And it doesn't come as a surprise to me because this is not anything new to the New York Jets. This isn't just Jamal Adams. In sports nowadays, we see superstars constantly just demanding trades for literally no reason. Anthony Davis demanded a trade out of New Orleans, not because New Orleans was dysfunctional. They were coming off a season in which they had made the playoffs and swept Portland in the first round. No. He wanted out of New Orleans just because he wanted to go to LA. That was it. No other reason. They weren't dysfunctional. They weren't mistreating him. They were coming off a year where they made the playoffs in the West, I might add, won a series, and they had surrounded him with DeMarcus Cousins, Nikola Mirotic, Rajon Rondo. They were a good team. Which, in the case of Jamal Adams, on the other hand, this isn't for no reason. This isn't just an out of the blue, get me out of here. There's a reason behind this. And quite frankly, the reason is, this is just a New York Jets thing. How often do you hear about a player demanding a trade out of the biggest market in sports? When does that happen? Odell Beckham, despite all of his faults, and despite the very long list of faults of the New York Giants, he wanted to stay. Odell Beckham didn't get traded because he wanted out. Odell Beckham got traded because the Giants wanted him out. Odell Beckham loved New York. They made the playoffs just once during his tenure, and he loved it. Why would things be any different with Jamal Adams? And the reason is, the Jets are dysfunctional. And it's really something that's gone under the rug for years now, because for the past 20 or so years, when you think of, that really bad, dysfunctional, poorly run team in the NFL, who do you think of? You think of the Cleveland Browns. And you're lying if you say you don't. People in Cleveland think of the Cleveland Browns when they're talking about bad sports teams. And I think the Browns' laughably bad mediocrity has really masked just how bad the New York Jets have been for the past couple of decades, really. I mean, the last time they made a serious playoff run was when Mark Sanchez was their quarterback. That's just how bad things have been in New York. And it's not just about the talent on the field. It's about the front office. And a very specific case of this is if you're a Jets fan or even a diehard NFL fan, you know who Mike Maccagnan is. Mike Maccagnan was the Jets general manager for a good amount of time. And during his tenure, the team for the most part was just bad. They had a 10-6 season, but that was as far as they ever went. No playoff berths. And during Maccagnan's tenure, he made some horrible moves. It was almost as if overpaying defensive backs was his forte. He did it like none other. And if you got drafted in the second round by the Jets during this time, it was a death sentence. You weren't going to pan out. And my cases for this is, here's just the list of moves that Mike Maccagnan made during his tenure as the New York Jets general manager. He gave defensive back Trumaine Johnson an $88 million contract. Johnson lasted 2 seasons with the team and is now an unemployed free agent. Just 2 years after signing a contract worth nearly $90 million, Trumaine Johnson is unemployed. The league needs defensive backs to guard these receivers like DeAndre Hopkins and Julio Jones, and Trumaine Johnson can't find a job. He spent a 3rd-round draft pick on Ardarius Stewart. If you're a Jets fan, you know Ardarius Stewart. Would you have spent a 3rd-round pick on him? Would you have spent a 5th-round pick on him? Would you have spent your 7th-rounder on him? I'm not so sure I would. He spent a 2nd-round pick, and now this is where the 2nd-round picks come into play. He spent a 2nd-round pick on wide receiver Devin Smith. Devin Smith finished with just 10 receptions during his tenure in New York and finished overall with 15 career receptions for a 2nd-round pick. It's safe to say the expectations were probably just a little bit higher than that. He signed an aging Darrelle Revis to a 5-year, $70 million contract. That is now 2 corners with borderline record-breaking contracts, neither of which panned out, I might add, and both were off the team in 2 seasons. Revis during that last season was just atrocious. I wouldn't say his highlight of the year was just getting burned by Marquise Goodwin earlier in the season. You paid $70 million for that? And then the move that just puts an exclamation point to the sentence that was Mike Maccagnan's tenure in New York. He drafted Christian Hackenberg in the 2nd round of the 2016 draft. Christian Hackenberg. If you're an NFL fan, if you even like NFL memes, you know who Christian Hackenberg is. Christian Hackenberg just might be the worst quarterback in NFL history. Here's a little stat for 2nd-round picks. Quarterbacks picked in the 2nd round have never gone two seasons without attempting an NFL pass. Until Christian Hackenberg was drafted. Christian Hackenberg was so bad that despite being drafted in the 2nd round by a very quarterback-needy team, the team finishing 5-11 and having Bryce Petty and Ryan Fitzpatrick as their quarterbacks. Christian Hackenberg, as a 2nd-round pick with every political advantage over these guys, did not even attempt a pass in 32 games. That's how bad he was. Mike Maccagnan drafted this guy in the 2nd round over Dak Prescott. And you know what? It's safe to say, who saw Dak Prescott coming? I can agree with that move. I don't think anyone saw the 4th rounder from Mississippi becoming the player that he did. But Christian Hackenberg, if they had picked Cardale Jones, I would have probably said that they made out better than drafting Christian Hackenberg. If they had drafted Connor Cook, at least Connor Cook threw an NFL pass. You at least got him, he got to prove he couldn't play. Christian Hackenberg was just so bad in practice with 3rd team members that he could not get on the field. So, based off of what I just read, Mike Maccagnan does not have a good resume by any stretch of the imagination. But these past couple of seasons, he was actually starting to pick up some steam and actually do the right thing for a change. Some examples. In the past couple of seasons, Mike Maccagnan, the Jets were sitting at 6th in the draft back in 2018. It was very quarterback heavy. The Jets needed a guy. Their roster was Bryce Petty, Christian Hackenberg, and I want to say they had signed Teddy Bridgewater by that point. It's very obvious you need a franchise quarterback. Sitting at the 6th pick, though, it's a little risky. You're not so sure you can actually get that guy. So what does he do? He makes a trade with Indianapolis. He moves from 6 all the way into the top 3 at the 3rd pick. You might ask yourself, what was the price? He gave up 3 second-round picks in order to get up to the 3rd spot and eventually select Sam Darnold from USC, who would eventually become the team's franchise quarterback. You mean to tell me you spent 3 second-round picks, and in exchange you got a franchise quarterback? And there's always that guy out there who overvalues draft picks and will be like, oh, come on, man, what are you doing? 3 second-rounders? Yeah, 3 second-rounders. You look at the Jets' track record with second-rounders. What were the odds that any of those players would have panned out? You got Devin Smith and Christian Hackenberg on your resume. And I would say my sort of closing statement for that argument is you look at what teams gave up in order to move up and get guys like Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. They gave up the farm and then some to get those guys. The Jets got they got Sam Darnold for second-round picks. Those other teams were giving up their first-rounders. They were giving up drafts worth of picks. And the Jets, who I would argue were more desperate for a quarterback than either of those teams, only second-rounders. Great move by Mike Maccagnan. Then, oh no, just one season before that, he drafted Jamal Adams, the player who now wants out of New York, who is currently one of the best, if not the best, safety in the league. So Mike Maccagnan, towards the end of his tenure, drafted the Jets' best offensive player and the Jets' best defensive player. And neither of them are scrubs. They're both very good, productive players. Sam Darnold, most of us would love to see what he can do with an actual supporting cast around him. And then Jamal Adams, despite the Jets' woes on defense, has already established himself as a Pro Bowl and All-Pro caliber player. Mike Maccagnan drafted both of them. It didn't just stop at the draft. Mike Maccagnan was starting to sort of finally spend the money in free agency. In one free agency class alone, he landed Le'Veon Bell and C.J. Mosley, who were both the best player on their respective side of the ball. How often is it that in free agency, a team can say that they landed both the best offensive and the best defensive player from the class? It doesn't happen. It's just unheard of. But then the Jets, they did something. They did the most Jets thing possible after this happened. Just shortly after signing Le'Veon Bell and C.J. Mosley to massive contracts, the Jets fired Mike Maccagnan before the start of the regular season. And that's just unheard of. I mean, typically when teams decide they want to fire a staff member, especially a coach or GM, they do it at the beginning of the offseason. So then his replacement has a fair chance to do the draft on his own, do free agency on his own, and do whatever he has to do to build the team to his liking. No, the Jets didn't do that. They waited until after free agency to decide they wanted to move on from Mike Maccagnan. Now that was a move that just reeked of dysfunction. And only one thing changed. How is it that Mike Maccagnan can make moves that would put him into the conversation for worst general manager in the game, and he keeps his job, but he makes 2 home run draft picks and has a monster free agent class signing, and they decide they want to fire him before we can even see one game of those free agents on the field? Like, Mike Maccagnan was not employed by the Jets when Le'Veon Bell and C.J. Mosley actually played their first games in New York. How does that happen? The simple answer is Adam Gase. During Todd Bowles' tenure, who was the Jets' former head coach, there was no problems. Mike Maccagnan was safe. Todd Bowles was safe. It wasn't until Adam Gase showed up that suddenly Mike was a problem. And there were rumors from the start that the two butted heads and didn't exactly agree about the direction that the team was going in. The biggest rumor being Gase did not approve of the fact that Maccagnan had signed Bell to such a lucrative, massive contract. He did not want to pay a running back that kind of money. And I see a lot of weight to this story. During his tenure in Miami, when Jay Ajayi, his contract was expiring, what did he do? He shipped him off to Philadelphia for a 4th-round pick. It's no secret Adam Gase does not want to pay running backs. And he happened to walk into a situation with, at the time, the league's highest paid running back in terms of guaranteed dollars. This was not something that was set up for success from the beginning. And then, so let me just understand this power struggle. You have a head coach who had just one winning season during his entire tenure in Miami. Just one winning season. You have a general manager who, albeit he has a terrible track record, was finally beginning to do the right thing in the past couple of seasons. You have those two guys, one of which has been there for years, the other one, Adam Gase, just got there. And before you can even see the final product hit the field, you move on from him in favor of a mediocre at best head coach. I just don't get it. Not only did you go in favor of the mediocre head coach, but you went in favor of the mediocre head coach who was very clearly going to be a problem in the locker room. You can't publicly state that you do not want a certain player on the team and expect that to go well. The key to winning in the NFL is you need to establish a good relationship with your star players, because they're going to be the ones who take you to the promised land. He didn't do that with Le'Veon Bell. He didn't do it at all. And quite frankly, he's done a terrible job protecting Sam Darnold. At the end of the day, I just don't get it. You decided to keep Mike Maccagnan after he overpaid multiple defensive backs and spent a 2nd-round pick on possibly the worst quarterback in NFL history. But when he signs Le'Veon Bell and C.J. Mosley, you decided it was time to move on, conveniently, right after Adam Gase was hired. The Jets landed both the best offensive and defensive player in 2019 free agency and found a way to mess it up. The whole situation, it just goes a lot deeper than Jamal Adams demanding a trade. It truly is worth noting how horribly the Jets have been mismanaged for years now. Take Adams out of the equation. Let's just forget Jamal Adams. We are now witnessing the Jets ruin Sam Darnold, hang Le'Veon Bell out to dry behind a terrible offensive line, and for some reason trust Adam Gase as the savior of their franchise. Somehow the man with just one winning season as an NFL head coach has been deemed worthy enough to drive the Jets further and further into NFL mediocrity. The Jets are going to be a doormat for a while if they can't turn this around. And I guess my point of all this was, let's not just bash Jamal Adams for wanting a trade. Because we so often don't side with the athlete. We're like, oh, you make millions. Who cares if you're winning or not? It's not even about winning. Just, you need to be surrounded by a healthy organization. And Jamal Adams hasn't. So, quite frankly, I'm on Jamal's side. He has every right to want out of what has been a dysfunctional situation from the second he got there. And if you're a New York sports fan, unfortunately, it's not just the Jets who are like this. Rumors surfaced that New York Knicks president Leon Rose is not sold on small forward Kevin Knox. And if you don't know who Kevin Knox is, just 2 years ago, he was a lottery pick by the New York Knicks. He's only 20 years old, and the Knicks have already decided that they want to move on. And I feel bad for Kevin Knox. I can't lie. I used to be one of those guys who was like, well, you make millions, just suck it up and live with it. But I feel for Kevin Knox. And I feel for all of the Knicks draft picks because, quite frankly, Kevin Knox is just another victim of the vicious cycle of dysfunction in New York. I think we reached a point where the Knicks should just trademark the word dysfunction. We saw how they treated Carmelo Anthony. We saw how the Kristaps Porzingis experiment ended. So when are we going to just look at this and realize maybe these guys aren't busts? Maybe they're just not being managed the correct way. And there really is a cycle, and I think I've broken down the cycle of how a career goes for a New York Knicks lottery pick. And then when I looked at their lottery picks of recent years, it all added up to me. Like, you're going to think that this next little segment's a joke, but it's not. It's just, these are facts. So now let me just walk you through the life cycle of a New York Knicks lottery pick. You get drafted in the top 10. It's the happiest day of your life. You know, you were probably a college superstar, and now you're heading to the Big Apple. You're going to New York. You're going to be a superstar. Well, things get off to a rocky start because chances are, within a month or two, your head coach will get fired. And eventually, your entire front office is going to get overhauled. So now the guy who coached you up during your rookie season, forget everything he told you because he's gone. And the people who drafted you, they're gone too. So now a new regime's coming in, and chances are you're not going to have the best confidence because the guy who brought you in, he's gone, and this new general manager just might not care for you. You had a rocky rookie season, but guess what? You're heading into year 2. Hopes are high. You have high expectations. Are you going to take the leap and solidify yourself as a starting caliber player? Well, guess what? Chances are, with the new coaching staff, new general manager, the team just signed a washed-up 38-year-old who plays the exact same position as you. And guess what? They probably didn't sign them to come off the bench. They just signed a 38-year-old to start over you and take your minutes away. Now, you're absolutely buried in the lineup. You're getting 15 minutes a game. And guess what? Your name has now been mentioned in countless trade rumors. Your confidence is shattered. You're not getting playing time. The team constantly talks about trading you, but they don't actually do it. They just further shatter your confidence until you're out of the rotation completely. Congratulations, my friend. You are now a true New York Knicks draft pick. And I wish I could say I made any of that up. That may have sounded brutally honest, but I'm not making that up. Since coming into the league, this is what's happened to Kevin Knox. He was drafted by the Knicks with the 9th pick back in 2018. Quite frankly, when did the Knicks not have a top 10 pick? So Kevin Knox, drafted in the top 10. He had an okay but very inefficient rookie season. He was able to put up 13 points per game, but only on 37% shooting. So you like it from a rookie, but he obviously needs to clean up his efficiency and shot selection. And then in free agency, after horribly whiffing and missing on Kyrie Irving, Kemba Walker, Kevin Durant, and even losing the lottery and not getting Zion Williamson, the Knicks decide they want to sign Marcus Morris, age 30, Reggie Bullock, age 29, and Bobby Portis in the offseason, all of whom play identical to similar positions as Kevin Knox. After spending the 9th pick on Knox to be their franchise forward, the Knicks then signed 3 small forwards in free agency. Show me a team that runs a lineup of 3 small forwards. It's just, you don't do it. Year 2 is now underway, and guess what? Kevin Knox is no longer a starter and has seen his minutes virtually disappear in favor of dead-end veterans such as Morris and Portis. And now we find ourselves in the summer of 2020, and the only thing hotter than the summer heat is Kevin Knox trade rumors. And this is a horrible situation to see because, one, Kevin Knox's confidence has to be shattered by this. You look at his shooting woes, chances are that didn't help his confidence, and now you throw his name in trade rumors left and right. What do you expect from the kid? And I think the most heartbreaking part is the fact this could have been over months ago. They could have just packaged him at the deadline and gotten D'Angelo Russell. And for those who say, oh, they didn't have the assets to get D'Angelo Russell, Golden State would have happily accepted a center like Mitchell Robinson, a shooter like Kevin Knox, and the Knicks lottery pick in exchange for D'Angelo Russell. And people are going to say, oh, that's crazy. Why would you give that up? Guess what? Mitchell Robinson is not the superstar that Knicks fans think he is. Plain and simple. Everywhere I look, with any kind of trade rumor, every Knicks fan, nope, leave Mitchell Robinson out of it. No, why? Why would you do that? Yes, he set the NFL, my bad. He set the NBA record for field goal percentage in a season. But he's a 7-footer who takes 6 shot attempts per game. What do you expect from the guy? Do you think he's going to shoot 50% or even 40%? No, he's going to make shots. And then with the lottery pick, I'm not even saying this as a joke. What are the honest chances that the Knicks get that pick right? And I'm not saying that to be mean. Just what are the actual chances that the Knicks do not select another bust with that pick? And I think the main reason I say they should have just packaged Knox for D'Angelo Russell is because the Knicks have been starving for a franchise point guard for so long. And if you don't think that's what D'Angelo Russell is, just look at the impact he had in Brooklyn. They were nothing for years. He showed up, the first season was a little rocky. Year 2, he becomes the star and the leader of that locker room. And he leads them to a playoff spot. Albeit they did lose in 5 to Philadelphia, I would not have picked the Brooklyn Nets to not only make the playoffs, but to actually steal a game from the Sixers. D'Angelo Russell was that kind of player. And to see him in New York, it would have been very fitting. He would have finally got his team back. Let me rephrase that. I'm not saying he would have come back to the Knicks. I'm saying he would have gotten his own team again, the way he had in Brooklyn. And New York would have finally had the franchise point guard that they've swung and missed on for so many years. Mitchell Robinson is not as special as Knicks fans think he is. He's a good center, but you had Kristaps Porzingis. You've proved that you can actually somewhat scout big men. Mitchell Robinson can be replaced. D'Angelo Russell, though, you haven't had a point guard since Stephon Marbury washed out in 2007. That's how long it's been. And even then, that was a ugly marriage that ended in a horrible divorce. If the Knicks were smart, they would have just done this months ago, rather than keeping it looming, ruining Knox's confidence, and even his trade value in the process. Between Jamal Adams wanting out of New York and Kevin Knox being on the trade block 2 months too late, it really is a hard time to be a New York sports fan, and I feel for you. I would say the only benefit is it makes me feel better about my teams. And once again, I'm sorry if that offended a fan out there. Thank you all so much for watching. For newcomers, you can catch a Breath of Fresh Sports on Thursdays on platforms such as YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and TuneIn. Regardless of how you listen, your support really does mean a lot to me. I know I say it a lot, but it's just because I mean it. Anyone who watches this show, I can't thank you enough. Any form of support means the world to me, whether that's with a like, a subscription, or even on Apple Podcasts, a rating. It all means a lot to me, and I would never ask anyone to do those things, but it means a lot to me when you do. And like I said in the intro, if just one of you can walk away entertained, then I think I've done my job, so thank you. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please don't hesitate to rate this episode of the show. It would actually help me get noticed in the new and noteworthy section, so it really would mean the world to me. Shout out to my editor Emma for helping to make this possible. She handles all the behind the scenes stuff that I quite frankly couldn't do. And I send my condolences to all you New York sports fans out there. And as always, have a great day. I'll see you next Thursday.